So hello everyone, thanks for coming. And my name is pronounced Kuszewski, by the way. I know it's terrible. I can always tell who knows me and who doesn't know me, who knows me from just online and who's met me in person because they can't pronounce my last name. So please follow me on Twitter. Very active on Twitter and other social media. So everything that I'm referring to today, I've actually written about more extensively, either for Scientific American or Discover or my own blog, other conferences. So if anything here interests you, you can always find out more information just by Googling my name, and you can find everything there. So I wanted to start out by reading you this quote. In this age of innovation, even more important than being an effective problem solver is being a problem finder. It's one thing to look at a problem and be able to generate a solution. It's another thing to be able to look at an ambiguous situation and decide if there's a problem that needs to be solved. That's a skill that really isn't targeted by traditional teaching methods, and in fact, it's often discouraged. In order to teach problem finding, more creative methods must be utilized. Rule breaking, to an extent, should be tolerated and encouraged, and yes, even taught. This is taken from an article that I wrote called The Educational Value of Creative Disobedience, about how we can start teaching these kinds of behavior from birth, really, and how our present school system kind of beats it out of you by the time you get to be an adult. But it's actually very applicable to everything we're talking about here. What I've noticed through some of the talks that I've listened to over this conference is that there's always this pushing and pulling between needing structure, because you have a big organization, you have lots of goals, you need to organize things, you want it to get done right, you don't want people going off and doing their own thing, you want to stay on track. But then you also need creativity. You need people to be able to troubleshoot, think on the spot. Things come up unexpectedly, always, and you need to know how to deal with those. So how do you encourage creativity, the ability to handle anything that comes up, no matter what it is, and be able to generate a new solution that's still going to answer to the overall goal without bringing you off track and maybe even bringing you closer to your goal. And it's a difficult thing, but I do have a way that you can teach that. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about creativity, what it is and what it isn't, bust some of the myths about it, and then I'm going to start from childhood, how you can teach creativity from childhood, and then also how you can teach it in an adult situation. I'm going to talk about a case example of my own training of my therapy staff in order to be autonomous and creative while still reaching the overall goal. So I'm sure probably everyone in this room has seen this graphic. It's beautiful. Left brain, right brain. It's from Mercedes. I hope no one works for Mercedes here. If so, I apologize. Because this model here is not correct. It's actually absolute crap. So this is why every organization that's doing things like advertising should have a psychologist on staff, because this never would have got past my desk. So what this is telling you here is that left brain is scientific, it's logical, all the critical thinking happens here, and then the right brain is creative, imaginative, passionate, all the artsy stuff happens on the right brain. Well, that's actually not true. So creative cognition, when you're talking about creativity, so there's different ways. There's creative output and there's creative cognition, the way you actually think creatively. So creative cognition, it's not painting a picture. It's not composing music. What it is, neuroscientifically, it's actually thinking with both sides of your brain. So you're going back and forth between conventional and unconventional thinking. If you're only thinking with the right side of your brain, you'd be schizophrenic, because it'd be stimulus all the time. Everything has relevance. There's no order. Everything has agency, and there's no organization to it whatsoever. So that would be total chaos. So creativity actually involves coming up with all these wild ideas, and then you go back and you tailor them down. You weigh for relevance. Are these things, do they make sense in this context? Is it a good thing to do? Do we even have the money for this kind of thing? Or is it just a total wild, thing that no one ever heard of, but it really doesn't answer to what we want to solve? And the actual definition of creativity is an original, novel solution that is both useful and appropriate given the context, environment, and task at hand. So people often have a problem with useful. They're like, well, what do you mean useful? What about a piece of artwork? Are you saying it can't be creative because it's not useful? Well, it is if it's actually telling a story. So when I went to art school in between psychology degrees, just because it was fun. And when I took art history, my eyes were really opened up to the way I viewed art. Because you can look at a painting on a wall and it looks pretty, versus you can look at another painting and it's telling a story, and the more you learn about it, you realize how clever it is, and their use of color and the imagery and the iconography and all these things are telling this really complex story, and the more you look, the deeper you look, the more the story evolves. And that is really creative. That's adding things in there that are useful to tell a story. So when we're talking about useful, it can be across any domain. And by definition, creativity involves breaking the rules. So if you're always following the outline, and you're never ever deviating from the outline, there would never be any advancement in this world. Imagine if no one ever decided to try to figure out how to create the printing press, because there wasn't one around. No one was doing that, you know. Anytime you look at any kind of great invention or great advancement, it's always been by breaking the rules in some way. But this can cause problems, because you don't want people just going out willy-nilly, you're breaking the rules everywhere. You need to have some kind of order to it, because we all want to live. You don't want to be breaking rules and, you know, bad things can happen. So starting out in the classroom, this is a study that came out in 1995. And what they were looking at was how teachers value creativity, because everyone said, oh, we love creative students, it's important, we want to encourage creativity. So they really looked at it, because they realized that people really weren't encouraging creativity in schools. In fact, our school system is the exact opposite of that. It's crushing it out of you. So they asked these teachers, like, okay, what kinds of personality characteristics would you associate with someone who's highly creative? And they had them generate a list of things. So some of the things they came up with were determined, independent, individualistic. And the words that were associated with low creativity: responsible, sincere, reliable, dependable, clear thinking, tolerant, understanding, peaceable, good-natured, steady, practical, and logical. Okay? So then they asked these same teachers who had just generated these lists and had also just said they value creativity, we want you to rate your students from least favorite to most favorite based on these characteristics. And guess what? Guess who the favorite students were? The ones that were peaceable, good-natured, steady, practical, logical. The ones that were rated as least favorite were also the most creative. That tells you something right there. They like the students who followed the outline, didn't break the rules. Because you know what? Creative students, it's a pain in the butt. You know, you have to actually pay attention. You have to modify things now and then. When they want to do something that deviates from the outline, you have to check and see if it's an okay thing to do. Is it still meeting the goals? Is it allowed? You know, and that takes a little bit more brain power. So teachers didn't want to do that. Now, this is in 95, and I can say things are starting to move in a better direction, but we still have a very long way to go. And this is a big thing. Everyone says they want creativity, but it's often rejected in practice, and it's not encouraged, and it's punished and not rewarded. So this next study looked at organizations and higher organizations. So companies, when you look at ads for job postings, what do they want? You know, someone who can think on their feet, forward thinking, you know, creative, a self-starter, all these things. Well, these things are associated with creativity and innovation and independence, but is that really what they want? They say they want it, but then when you actually hire someone like that, what happens when you start to question whatever the set rule is? So what they found was that there's actually a bias against creativity, and that's fueled by uncertainty. So when you look at what creativity is, so you have one problem. And when I used to teach some of my clients with Asperger's how to think creatively, one of the things I did was that every single problem has more than one solution, multiple solutions. No matter what it is, even if it's a math problem, there's always more than one way to arrive at that answer. So I would teach them to generate as many answers as possible that still answered that question. And then there's a range of appropriateness, you know, more appropriate, less appropriate, based on context. So there's this uncertainty. So you come up with an idea, a solution to a problem that's never been heard before. And there's always that little bit of uncertainty. Well, I don't know if it's going to work. It's never been done before. So that weighs in our mind, and we don't like that. So right away, there's that bias. We don't like uncertainty. We want to fix that. And so one of the scholars that they interviewed for this study, they said effective creative problem solving includes both generating many novel options and subsequently reducing uncertainty by identifying the single best option from the set. So what do? You generate all these solutions. We have uncertainty, so we're going to pick the best one. And that's going to reduce the uncertainty, right? So then what does that do? That actually goes against what creative thinking is generating multiple solutions. So you're saying, this is the best one. That's the one single answer. Well, it's counterintuitive there. So when you're trying to do this, you're creating an intolerance for the uncertainty by identifying the optimal solution. So we're kind of in a conundrum here. We don't know what to do. So we want to be able to allow multiple solutions, but we want to identify the best one, but then that fuels the bias, and we're in this like negative feedback loop, right? Because people seek to avoid and diminish uncertainty. So what do? They kill the creative idea. When it comes down to it, and there's pressure on us, and there's a deadline, and we have all this weighing on us, the last thing we want to do is try something creative that may or may not work. And so you think about managers. So you're in charge of the team, and you have this, this deadline and this goal, and you have all these people working on it, and someone comes up and they say, you know what, I thought of a different way to do this. I think it would be really cool if we tried, this other way. And what's your job? You're the gatekeeper. So you need to say, okay, what's the best way to do this? What's the most accurate way? What's going to, get us to our goal faster? And, you're creating that unacknowledged aversion to creativity just by doing that. So there's always more than one good solution, but the key here is that it varies depending on context. So always keeping context in mind, you can kind of address the, we need to pick one, we can't do everything, we need to do one thing. So maybe you can choose this one solution because it works better in this environment, but maybe across this other environment we're going to do it a different way. So you have a multiple range of solutions based on context. So when you're looking at creative behaviors, so there's actually a range of creative contributions, and this is by Robert Sternbuck. He wrote prolific publisher, and I think I gave Jabe a whole list of things that he had written to look at as far as creativity and how it relates to corporate environments too. And one of the things, he came up with 8 types of creative contributions. So starting at the very most basic, replication and redefinition. These are things like you're coming up with a new idea, but it's to a problem, and it's a new idea to solve that problem, but you're not actually changing anything about the way it's set up. You're not changing that paradigm at all. Forward incrementation, same kind of thing, a little bit more bold. So you're moving the field forward a little bit, but you're not really deviating from the direction it was already going. Advanced forward incrementation, you're going forward maybe past where anyone saw it would go, but you're thinking further ahead in the future, faster than the pace it was already going to go, but you're still going in the same direction. So now you're moving into kind of the next phases here, redirection. Now you're trying to turn things a little bit around, and this is where people start to get uneasy. So redirection, reconstruction, redirection. So now you're looking at changing the paradigm. You know, this is how we always thought of this problem, and now you're saying, well, there's actually another way to look at it, and then people start getting uneasy. Integration, finally, is just a complete mashup of paradigms that have already existed, and you put them together and you create something totally new. And so what we're looking at, the first 4 here, they're accepting the current paradigms, and you just want to extend them. So you're not trying to really change the world here. You're just trying to bring things forward in that field. And people are generally OK with this to an extent. The next 3, you're rejecting those paradigms and replacing them with something else. So you're saying, we need to look at this in a different way. We're going to redefine what this problem is. And those are the ones, these 3 right here, are the ones that people really have a problem with. So when you're in an organization and someone comes up with something that is at this level of creativity, that's where people start to get really uneasy because it's so uncertain. You know, it's never been there before. We don't know what to do with that. And then integration is just merging all of these distant paradigms and creating something completely new. Actually, right now, we see a lot more of that in the tech industry. There's a lot of merging of all these different paradigms into one new model, and a lot of startups actually begin that way. So, looking at how to teach and encourage it, and when not to. So when you start early years, there's a psychology researcher, Alison Gopnik, and she is amazing. If you ever want to read her work, you will not regret it. She was looking at creative behavior in young children. And what she did is she had these toddlers, and they were sitting in a room, and they had the researcher was sitting there playing with them, and she came out with this really kind of elaborate toy that it turned, and you pulled things off of it, and it made sound when you did certain things. And there were a handful of ways to make it make music. And so what she did was, in one group, she showed the kids how to have it make music. She did a few actions, and she said, now you make it play music. And so the kids, of course, they looked at how she did it, and they replicated what she did, and they had it make music. People say, oh, look, they learned how to use that toy. Okay, well, the next group of kids, she came in with the same toy, and she kind of pulled on some things that didn't really do much, but then she set it down, and she said, make it make music, make it go. So then these kids had to look at it, and they're like, whoa. I don't know, they're turning it over, pulling on random things. Through a course of experimentation, they learned how to make it play music. It took a little longer, but they learned how to do it. And the thing is, there was more than one solution to make it play music. And the way that the experimenter demonstrated was not the most intelligent solution. However, the children were able to find the more intelligent solution. It had only 2 actions versus a whole string of actions, and they were able to do it consistently. So when you look at which group of children actually learned, it was the second group. So when they're given a problem and told how to figure out how something works, they can generate the most intelligent solutions. But when they were shown what to do, when you give them an outline, when you say, here, do this, and they do it, they may be able to replicate that, but do they understand why they did it? Do they know that every time they turn the yellow box, it prepares the red cube to make noise? Probably not. So then when you throw another situation in there, are they going to be able to solve that, applying that same model? No. So basically, the take-home points from this, encouraging critical thinking and finding more than one correct solution to a given problem helps to develop creativity. So when you're giving someone a problem versus, here's how you do something, now do it, okay? Multiple choice test, you're memorizing things. That's not really helping you be creative. That's telling you one solution. When you encourage them to follow the outline, you're not learning deep understanding. It actually decreases your ability to problem solve. So when I would work with children, I would not just have them memorize things like, whatever question I would give them and then give them the answer. I would present a problem and have them think about it, generate as many answers as they could think of, and then, you differentiate between the best answers and ones that maybe don't fit. And then if they give a wrong answer, always explaining why it's wrong. If you don't understand why something is wrong, you're never going to learn how to do it. That is like a big, huge take-home point. That should be in big, shouty letters across the screen. I should have had a slide just for that. So when you're giving someone an outline and you don't let them break the rules, you don't let them deviate from that, you're not teaching them why you do something. When you train people, it should be, here's the way that we do it. This is why this step is the way it is. This step, actually, you cannot deviate from because of these ways. This is why this has to stay fundamental. These things here, this is how we do it because we found it works well. But there's room within this for creativity if it still meets that overall goal. Explaining that when you're training someone really allows them to understand why they're doing it. They become more autonomous, more independent, and they're able to think on their feet. And I actually used this model when I used to train therapists myself. So I started out my career as a behavior therapist working with children on the autism spectrum. And so what I did was I would have individual clients that were ranging from age from 3 to 12, and I would have to create a treatment plan for them, teaching a range of skills, anything from social skills, colors, numbers, anything you could think of, depending on what child it was. And I had to create these different programs for teaching these skills, and they were highly detailed. Step 1, you look at this. Step 2, ask this question, and it's, it's very detailed, very complicated. So everything would be, highly written out. But the problem is, I wasn't there all the time. So these other therapists were working one-on-one with the kids. I couldn't be there always to point out things that might come up. So if they always strictly followed the outline, you notice that the progress wasn't really going along. It was going up, but not as high as it could be like when I would work. And so I'm like, well, what's the difference between when I'm working and when they're working? Well, it's because I have my outline, but I know when to deviate from it. I know when to change what I'm doing or change the way I ask something based on someone coming in the room or the temperature is different or something happens, and I know how to adapt to that in order to create the best learning environment so that their progress will go as high as possible. So I thought, how can I actually create this in my staff? So what I did was I taught them how to ask and answer questions, not memorize outlines. So when I would train them, I would say, okay, here's a situation. Here's what we need to teach. What do you think would work? What do you think would not work? Okay, why do you think that? Well, because it was in the handbook? Forget the handbook, okay? Just look at the child in front of you. What are his needs? How do we get there? What do you think might work? Let's try stuff, And getting them to think about it that way instead of thinking about following an outline really helped them to become more autonomous. So the big key here is keeping the integrity and the fundamental pillars of the goals. So no matter what you're teaching, no matter what you're creating, if you're creating a product or a software program or anything, you have the fundamental core pillars of why you're doing it. These certain things must stay intact. Otherwise, you're not going to reach your end goal. So there's usually a handful of those things that you can absolutely not deviate from. So you create the steps involved so that, this is one way to do it, and this is why it's keeping that pillar intact. So if you teach what those pillars are, the fundamental underlying goals, on top of whatever your method is, that's going to allow them to understand why they really can't break that step. But within those steps, you do have room to be creative, as long as you're always checking to make sure that you're not deviating from that fundamental goal, and that you're making progress towards the overall goal. So what happens now? Okay, so let's say you modify one step. And this actually happened in my current job, one of the things that I did. So right now I'm doing strategy for a life science marketing firm. And so I had to interview all of these scientists, and they were 1-hour interviews, and I needed to talk to people around a certain parameters. And so I was looking at who are the best people to talk to so I can hit on all of these different, perspectives. And this one person I thought I need to talk to this person because he has the absolute best perspective for this angle. He's like, well, he couldn't talk on the phone. Okay, so does that mean I move on to someone else? Well, no, there's another way to do it. So I got on Twitter and we did direct messaging. So we had an entire interview over Twitter direct messaging. So what did I do? I copied that conversation into a Word document. There's the transcript, okay? So now, did that actual interview take longer than an hour? Probably, okay? But did it end up being more efficient in the long run? Yeah, because now we didn't have to pay someone to transcribe the audio, So there's always another way to do things. And they may say, well, that one step was less efficient because it took longer than an hour. But the progress towards the overall goal, that was exponentially faster. So within each step, you can't look at, okay, I want to change this, oh, but it's taken you, 10 minutes longer, or it's going to cost a little bit more money. If it's going to save you money 3 steps down the road, maybe it's a good thing to consider. And individual people may make adjustments depending on, their individual goals. So the way I approach problems is different than someone else. I spend probably 3 times more time in the beginning of a project doing research, figuring out the motivation of my cohort, what drives them, what they hate, what they love, get them talking about things unrelated to what I actually want to know, which actually gives me more information about the core fundamentals. And I spend a lot more time at that stage. So when they look at how long my project is taking me, it's like, oh my God, we're backing up. We're never going to get done. But then what happens? The refinement stages, they don't exist because I know right away that the strategy that I actually come up with, I know I'm going to be on the money because I've actually done all my homework on the beginning end. Some people don't work that way. Some people like to learn as you go. I prefer to do all my work in the beginning so everything else can go faster. So the result of doing it this way, you allow your workers to have autonomy while consistently meeting their goals. So the main message through this is that training people to ask questions and think about problems before they receive a solution encourages and teaches creative thinking, and you're producing better innovators, problem solvers, and problem finders. So now, when I'm talking about problem finders versus problem solvers, everyone can solve a problem. You give them a problem, how do you solve it? And here's an outline how to do it. What about problem finding? Okay, things come up, you don't know what they are. It could be anything. You need to be able to look at a situation and say, is there a problem that needs to be solved? Is there a problem that will need to be solved? Can I anticipate something that's going to come up in the future? And then how will I address that so I can head it off before it even gets there? You're doing basically early intervention for problems down the road. If you're trained in creative thinking and you allow that and you encourage that in your employees, you're going to teach them to be problem finders, and things are going to go a lot smoother because you're not going to have to deal with things as they happen, putting on a Band-Aid. You're just going to prevent them from occurring in the first place. So this is actually a model that I created, and I apologize for how crude it is, but I actually created it yesterday after talking with some people at the Sunday night event. And I thought, you know what, it might be helpful to kind of map it out this way. So this is actually, I tried to reverse engineer what my process is for when I am following a protocol for something and something says, you know what, I can think of a different way to do that. And this is like the mental checklist I go through. So is this step that I'm doing, does it make the current step more efficient? Yes or no? Yes? Okay, you move on to the next thing. And no, maybe it's less efficient at this stage, but maybe it's better later on. So does this method make progress towards the overall goal? More progress? Good. About the same? Okay. Less progress? Don't do it. Okay? If you're taking it further away from the overall goal, it may be a really clever and creative way to solve this one particular aspect, but if it's actually taking you further away from the overall goal, not a good idea. If it's more progress and about the same, okay. Will other people be required to learn this? Is it something that I'm just going to do on the spot, like the Twitter direct messaging, correspondence with someone I was interviewing? That was just me in that moment. It was okay. No one else really needed to do it, so it was fine. So I might have made a mess here. Okay. So if others have to do it, okay. So let's say you create a new step because, you know what, the way we've been doing this step in the process is really inefficient, and I think this is a better way to do it, and this is going to set the stage for all of these other steps, and they're all going to be built on that. Okay, so other people are going to have to implement that. Can it scale up? If it can't scale up past just you or maybe 2 people, it's probably not a good idea because it's not going to have longevity in the long run. So at that point, if it doesn't scale up, maybe you can employ, some other people to help you figure out how to scale it up. And so finally, if all of these other things are met, you go back to that single question. Does this method maintain the integrity of the fundamental pillars of the project? Okay? What is the goal? Get information from people I'm interviewing so that I can contribute to my strategy. Okay? Met that overall goal. Yes, it's a good idea to do it. So finally, and I'm going through these things quickly because I want to leave time for questions because I have to actually go to the airport at noon, so I'm not going to be around later, so I'm going to be leaving a lot of time for questions. So how to create a creative work environment. So number 1, give them some space. Deadlines, yes, they're important, okay? One thing I can't stand is when I'm at my desk and I'm totally focused on what I'm working on, and it's like you're almost there, everything's very delicate and balanced, you can see all the variables floating around, and someone comes up, hey, how's it going? How long do you think before that's done? Is it done yet? How about now? How about now? You know, that's just like a killer for me. When I see someone walking towards my desk, I get this like visceral reaction where I just anticipate that, oh, it's going to all crumble. Even if they're not coming towards me, it's just I see that and I think that way. Because in order to have, creativity involves linking concepts in your working memory. So you're holding a bunch of different things in your working memory, all these loose concepts, loose associations, and then you're checking them for relevance. So it's like this process that's highly cognitive. And when you get disrupted, you know, all that kind of crumbles down. So you need to have that buffer against it. So what I do is, if I'm really on a deadline, I tell people when I get in the morning, I'm like, listen, when it's done, it will be on your desk. Until then, please don't bother me. Just, I need to work. Or I'll work from home. Number 2, don't micromanage. So allowing free time to work on anything they want. And this is something that Google has done for ages. I think 3M does it. A lot of different companies have done this now where they have the 20% time. And it seems like, oh, 20% of your time is spent working on stuff other than what you need to get done on your checklist. How can that possibly be productive? Well, what it does is that it actually increases creativity overall. Because what happens is when people are working on things in their free time, often those side projects will spark something that helps them figure out what they're supposed to be working on. Or an even better idea will come out of that free time that they can then apply to the work environment. Some of the most profitable little side projects from Google were actually from people's 20% time. Some of the most creative, long-standing projects at Google. I think Gmail was created in 20% time, actually. Opening your mind. So getting stuck in a hyper-focused, linear thinking pattern can stall creativity. And I think probably everyone has experienced this. I know when I was in art school, I would be working on a drawing, and I'm nitpicking, and I just can't get it right, can't get it right, can't get it right. You get into that negative feedback loop where you're just erasing drawing, you know. You're the same thought. You're in this circular pattern. And when I notice that happening, that's when you just need to step away. Take a walk, take 10 minutes, go get a cup of coffee, do that. You should never work for more than, I think, 90 minutes without taking at least a 10-minute break. And I know sometimes I get stuck in that, where I don't realize I've been sitting at my desk for 3 hours, and I've been idling and trying to figure something out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's been 3 hours. I need to take a break. And what happens as soon as I walk away? It comes to me. And there's a reason for that, because you get stuck in that pattern. You get really, really stuck on the left side of your brain. And I know this is not right and left side, but actually in this case, it is actually your left side, where you get stuck in that super logical, where you can no longer see the forest through the trees. So that's when, you know, taking breaks just to think about nothing. You know, I love just kicking back in a beanbag chair for 10, 15 minutes and think about absolutely nothing. And usually at the end of that 10 minutes, I have a ton of ideas on things that I can work on. The train ride into work is the best time for me for coming up with ideas. 1 hour on the train, I can't go anywhere, sitting out the window, thinking about nothing. By the time I get to work, I got the whole day planned out. And then finally, tolerating creativity. And this is more for the managers too. So rewarding creative thinking, not with financial incentives. So don't say, we're going to give you more money if you come up with a creative idea. That's actually shown to decrease creativity if you offer money as an incentive. But instead, promoting the conditions that permit it. Promoting the conditions that permit it. So tolerating the occasional failure. You know, creativity involves failure. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail. But then you're going to come to a better solution at the end. And that's a necessary part of the process. So having an intolerance for any kind of failure is exactly the opposite way to encourage creativity. So you need to teach them how to break the rules when necessary, when there is a social benefit. So going back to that chart that I showed you on how to go through that process of, is this a good time to break the rule? Is it a good rule to break? And to what degree? And that's it. So I'd love to take questions.